Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Malu Dumim in Israel. There are many things that people aspire to be. Some may hope to be powerful, others may strive for wealth. Still others may go for strength or beauty or wisdom or social skills. There are just so many things that people of all walks of life may set their sights on that it is virtually impossible to really pin down the single goal of everyone. That being said, there may be some near universals that most people hope to attain. On the mundane side, that probably includes some level of personal success. It probably also includes a certain standard of health. There is little question that almost everyone would put some amount of personal happiness on their bucket list. Those who try to focus on such things may also include the nebulous category of meaning or purpose among their personal goals in life. These may not be the sexiest of things to really shoot for, but they are pretty universal, and therefore they probably rank above the earlier list that varies from person to person. Then there are other goals out there that probably should be universal, but somehow have slipped off most people's radars. These include the types of things that we are told we should strive for, perhaps in some ancient religious or philosophy text, but which tend to get neglected in the hustle and bustle of modern life. Included in this category is the often maligned and always confusing subject of morality. We all know that we are supposed to be good people, but there are so many possible avenues for this that are frequently at odds with each other that the entire goal drifts out of our sights. There is no question that most people still consider this to be a primary goal of life, but because of its vagueness and lack of general recognition, it frequently falls behind the others in terms of priorities. There is one other example of this third category that is even more off the screen. This is so far from anybody's mind that anybody who is shooting for it today would probably be considered a bit out of their mind. This, in case you haven't figured it out, is the goal of holiness. Who wants to be holy today? Pretty much nobody. And if we meet such a rare bird, we make it a priority to stay far away from them. This is probably going to be some sort of religious nut who is constantly preaching or rebuking or whatever. If not that, it is going to be someone who, by virtue of their elusive goal, simply cannot interact socially with anybody normal. On top of all that, it is likely that this person will make others around them uncomfortable or awkward or guilty of not living up to their lofty standards. This week's Parsha is called Kadoshi. That word means holy, though it is in the plural. It is the only Parsha that contains the word holy, putting it on a fairly unique status. Before we go on in delving into the context of this Parsha, it should be noted that beginning last week, owing to a quirk in the Jewish calendar and the frequent differences between customs between Jews in Israel or outside of Israel, the system of reading the Parsha on Shabbat is not quite the same. It happens that the Parsha in Israel is one ahead of the Parsha outside of Israel and will be so for about the next few months. Because this podcast originates in Israel, we're going to be following the custom in Israel and always work with the Parsha as it is there. Hence this week's Parsha being Kadoshi. Now that we've cleared that up, we can get to the contents of the Parsha. This is one of the 3 or 4 Parshas that are essentially long lists of commandments that seem to have little or nothing to do with one another. In other words, these lists don't seem to have any particular sequence that systemizes them so that any given commandment leads to the one following. This is a bit confusing to one who reads through a Parsha like this. We would like there to be some sort of order that explains why this one is here and another is there. This may be detectable at times within small portions of the list, but it is almost impossible in going through the entire Parsha. With the Parsha with the name of holy, one might expect the general theme to be that of holiness. Alas, it is difficult to see how most of the commandments in this Parsha possess any uniqueness that elevates them to be selected for inclusion in a Parsha of this name. There are a few that might seem to be leaning more in that direction, and one section where holiness is really stressed, but on the whole, it is not easy to see why it was these commandments that made this unique grade. The opening line in the Parsha, the one that contains the word holy, goes like this. God spoke to Moshe saying, "Speak to the assembly of the Israelites and say to them, you shall be holy, since I am holy. I am HaShem your God." That's quite a statement. It's hard to imagine any book other than the Bible containing a line like that. While one might expect this line to be followed by some great example of how to become holy, there doesn't appear to be anything of the sort in the following verses. It goes right into honoring one's parents and keeping the Shabbat. Then there is something about not turning to false gods, and so on. While these are obviously important things and possibly stand at the pinnacle of biblical and Jewish values, they probably don't fit into most people's criteria for holy. So why is this isolated line about holiness here if most of the rest of the parsha has little or nothing obvious to do with attaining holiness? This is not an easy one to answer, though there have been many attempts to answer it. The parsha does contain a verse that may be the singular most universal rule of all humanity: love your neighbor as yourself. It is hard to imagine any single rule that outweighs this in universality and importance in all of human history. There could be a very solid case made for classifying a person who strives for this goal as holy. In fact, it would be difficult to imagine anybody saying that such a person is not holy, at least in some way. But still, even with that obvious example, it is the only one, and it is not exactly the standard impression most people have of holiness. It is being nice and good and decent and neighborly, and it makes the world go round. But it's not what people think of when they think of holy. So what do they think of? First off, most people really don't think too much about holiness. This is just not a hot topic on the social media dominated world we live in today. Is anybody going to talk about holiness on Facebook or Twitter? Are they going to show pictures or videos of holy deeds on Instagram or TikTok? Nobody really expects this, and if they find it, they are probably going to scroll right past it. But to belabor the point, in the off chance that people may think about holiness, where do they look? What direction does their mind go when they happen to venture into this forbidden territory? There may be a clue in this week's Parsha, of all places. It happens that in the opening line and in the couple of verses following, there is a phrase that keeps coming up. In fact, this phrase comes up no less than 10 times in the Parsha as a whole. It is a relatively common phrase in the Torah and the Bible in general. In the Torah, it happens that the overwhelming majority of times this phrase occurs are in the book of Leviticus, with most of those coming in this week's Parsha. That mystery phrase, which comes up again and again in this Parsha and in this book, is, quote, "I am HaShem, your God." The 10 times that this phrase occurs in the Parsha don't reveal any particular pattern that stands out. Sometimes it seems entirely appropriate, such as perhaps in the opening line, and in others it seems somewhat out of place. It is not the least bit clear why this line was used as an appendage to a verse dealing with agricultural laws or something about staying away from false gods or forms of worship. For that matter, it isn't all that clear what it has to do with keeping Shabbat or honoring one's parents. There may be some inherent importance to all those commandments, and of course they all stem from God. But why were these singled out with this phrase at the end? Without really attempting to answer this last question, but with the general attempt to tie the Parsha together with some idea of holiness associated with it, perhaps we can say that this phrase was included so many times in this section of the Torah, with this general verse opening up the entire section, because of a sense of awareness the Torah wished to promote. Perhaps more than anything else, in this section and maybe even in the book as a whole, it was the awareness of God's reality that was the primary goal. Perhaps this is what is really meant by the word holiness itself. It means to be aware of God's reality. That may manifest as doing this or that, but the general theme behind it is to be aware of God. This phrase is repeated throughout this parsha because this is what it means to be holy. It means to be aware of God at all times, or at the very least, to be aware of God at some times. When the Torah says, quote, "You shall be holy since I am holy, I am HaShem your God," it means that if you are aware of God's presence and God's reality, you will have made a major step in the general process of becoming holy. When it repeats this phrase in the next two verses in a seemingly haphazard manner, it means that even when doing things that may not appear to be all that holy, they can be made holy if an awareness of God is projected into the act. When at the end of the parsha, the explicit statement is made, quote, "Become holy and be holy, for I am HaShem your God," it means that your holiness is intricately and inexorably linked to your awareness of God's reality. This parsha, perhaps because of this phrase, is presenting a general plan for attaining holiness. It boils down to one single thing with a lot of possible details. The one thing is awareness of God. If one can somehow make some headway with this, however they might pursue that elusive goal, they will have gotten somewhere on the long and largely untapped road to holiness. This is certainly a road less taken, and it may not be for everybody. The Torah gives guideposts along that road, or specific actions in which to attempt to achieve God awareness. The Parsha is loaded with them. But the truth is that in any action or in any time or place and within any person, that goal can be sought and attained. It is simply a matter of turning on that switch to become aware and thus become holy. Shabbat Shalom.